Hi, I'm Rebecca, and welcome to my sewing room. This is So Be It. This week is a continuation of the video from last week. Last week I worked on pattern Butterick B6448 version C for my Easter dress this year. Last week was the fitting to help me with fitting the dress to my body, because I'm always pretty close to the actual pattern measurements, as long as I size up at the waist and hip, 1 to 2 sizes depending on the manufacturer. It seems I have to go up 1 size at the waist for Butterick and then 2 at the hip, but Simplicity I can just go up 1 size waist and hip and it seems to always fit me. But I used the fitting book, the techniques in here, to help me fit the pattern to my actual body specifications, because turns out I have a petite body frame, so I made a petite pattern adjustment. To see how I did that, go ahead and check out the video from last week. This week I'm almost completely moving on. I think I had ended the video last week by saying I don't actually have to adjust the sleeves on the dress. But while I was editing, I took a closer look at the sleeve on the dress before the pattern adjustment and then after, and I realized that it didn't change the look a whole lot without having to add the ease in, but there is kind of a nice shape of the sleeve before I adjust, before I made the pattern adjustment, and I want to keep that. So I will be adjusting the sleeve on camera and showing you how I do that. But I want to get into showing you the fabric for this dress, because I'm really excited about it. Let's see, over like the last 8 or 9 months, every time I would go to Joann's, I looked at the special occasion fabric, because I just like that really pretty fabric. And I really liked the embroidered fabrics, but I didn't get any. This time for my Easter dress, I decided I'm going to splurge a little bit and I am going to get the embroidered fabric. But obviously I need a lining for that embroidered fabric. So the lining of this dress, or the majority of this dress, because the embroidery is the overlay, is this really pretty blush pink satin. It has a little bit of body, not a whole heck of a lot, but some decent body. Here to show you, there we go. It'll drape nicely with this pattern. And it has a little bit of a texture. Let me see. Yeah, you can kind of see it here. There we go. And so I think it is really pretty. I really fell in love with this color. But I chose the embroidery overlay first, so obviously the satin had to match. Let me open it up and see if I can find a good spot. It has a bit of a border print, so I am planning to use that around the skirt of the dress. The mesh is a bit of like a peach color, and it's not pink, more cream than pink. And I looked for a satin that was the same color as the mesh, and I could not find one. But the pink satin I got really matches these flowers here. So I will be piecing the dress together when it comes to the cutting the overlay fabric. I will have it all laid out on the table and be piecing it so that it all looks nice and lines up hopefully in a nice cohesive way. So the first time I will be doing something like that instead of just matching plaids or somewhat matching plaids. So that'll be a fun experiment. So the first thing I have to do for the dress this week is to adjust my sleeve pattern. According to, better stop moving that so you can hear me. According to the fitting book, it did say by doing that petite pattern adjustment, it would increase the armhole, but based on my measurements, it actually decreased the armhole. However, when I originally was fitting, or when I was fitting the original pattern, I knew that I wanted that sleeve to be bigger already because it was already tight. So I actually will not be decreasing or following the directions in the fitting book because I need to keep the extra size of the sleeve. But the next step for that was to increase the sleeve the amount that you needed to based on the measurement. So, and it was just the sleeve cap that's supposed to be increased. So that's actually what I am going to do, is just increase the sleeve cap. And I'll show you how I do that. Okay, this is going to be a little bit awkward, but this way you can at least see what I'm doing. So this round dot is the top of the sleeve where I match the shoulder seam to this dot here. And I'm supposed to actually ease in the cap. Well, I don't have enough fabric here to actually ease it in. So we do know that a little bit of height goes a really long way when it comes to sleeve caps. I want to go more than a 1/4 inch. A 1/4 inch is not going to do much. And a 1/2 inch might be good. Honestly, I think 3/4 inches, just by looking at it, is going to be too much. So, at the center seam, I'm going to increase it by 1/2 inch. The next thing we want to do, I think I'm going to keep my notches where they're at. And then I'm going to taper this curve to the notches so that I have a new sleeve cap. We'll draw that and see how it looks and see if I think it will fit in the way it's supposed to with a little bit of poof at the top of the shoulder. I got this nice curved ruler here to help me get this line. I think you can somewhat see that new line. I do think that that might be enough of a little bit of a poof at the top of the shoulder. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out. So now that that is all figured out, my next step, I'll be cutting that out, and the next step is to lay out the satin fabric and to cut all of that out based on obviously the pattern layout, which I don't usually use, but I might this time because I think I have like just enough fabric for this dress. And then I will be back to show you how I'm going to lay out the pattern onto the embroidery. It'll be the first time I've done that, so that'll be kind of fun to learn. The bodice of this dress is lined, and I don't have a separate lining fabric, so I am using the satin that I have for the lining of this bodice. So instead of cutting 2 of these, I actually have to cut 4. 4 of these. 4 of these. And 2 of these because this is cut on the fold. So that will be taking a little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra fabric. So I am pretty sure that I did add the extra length I needed for the lining to this satin, because I do usually remember to do that. But I'm actually not completely positive that I did do that. So I'll let you know when I come back. I did want to mention real quick, I don't usually, when I cut out my fabric, I usually use my regular fabric scissors, and then once I get the seam stitched, that's when I will do any finishing, even if it is pinking. However, I don't want the satin to fray like as much as I can stop it, so I am cutting this pattern out with my pinking shears. So just a little bit of a tip that will hopefully stop as much fraying as possible from start to finish. Pinking is also how I was planning on finishing the seams that are not inside the lining anyways, so it will already be done before I even sew the seam. I have all of the lining and the pink satin for the dress cut out, but I'm going to change up the order of construction for this dress this time, just so I don't get pieces mixed up and confused. Normally I leave my pattern pieces pinned to the pieces that I need until I need to sew them together. In this case, I can't do that because I need the pattern pieces to also cut the overlay fabric. So they have to be detached from the satin pieces. So I don't have a problem with doing that for the bodice pieces. They are so different, you cannot mix up those pieces at all. And also the outside or the wrong side and right side of this fabric is really easy to tell the difference. So again, you can't mix that up either. However, the skirt pieces, yes, they are different because the front has that little bit of an elevated waistband. But they're not really different, and I am afraid that I am going to get very, very confused on what is what. So I'm putting the inside layer, the satin layer of the skirt pieces together right now before I cut anything else out. I have all of the pieces detached from their pattern pieces, and I even made like little paper labels to set on top of them, pin on top of them to make sure. And I'm still afraid that I'm going to mix these pieces up and then it'll eventually ruin my fabric and ruin my dress, and I don't want to do that. So first step for the skirt, I will literally tell you step by step, but it's straight seams, so I will be doing it off camera. First, you have to sew the center seam for our skirt front. These are our two skirt front pieces. This is the center front seam here. I'll be sewing that seam first. Then I will be sewing each of the skirt side front pieces, to this seam and this seam. So I'll have an entire, I didn't even get that clipped all the way through when I cut it. So then this will be the skirt front with the skirt side front. I will then move on to the back pieces and do the same thing with the back. However, I would like to make a point and show you on the skirt back, we always have the 3 notches for the skirt back seam, the center back seam, if we have a center back seam. This also has a center back zipper, so we cannot stitch all the way up our center back seam like we do our center front. The pattern has this big dot that I've also marked onto the fabric, and we stitch up to that large dot. And that's where it will meet the zipper. I think I will be stitching, actually no, I won't have to, because that'll go right up to the zipper. My zipper is a 20 to 22 inch zipper. The one that I used for the mock-up was a 22 inch zipper, and since I had to shorten that waistband a little bit, this did end up fitting perfectly when I stitched up to the large dot in the back. After I get the center back seam up to the large dot, I will then attach the skirt back sides to the skirt back, and then attach the front to the back at the side seams. I'm doing it that way because the overlay and the satin will be attached at the waist, but I want the overlay to be free from the satin part, so it's like 2 layers. But I'm flatlining the overlay and the satin for the bodice, so it acts as one piece of fabric, especially because I'm going to have that extra layer with the lining of the bodice. So then all of those seams will also be enclosed into the bodice, and we won't have to worry about the fraying and the finishing. So I'm going to go ahead and sew the satin skirt pieces together, and then I will be back to show you how I am going to do the overlay. I do have at this point my entire satin skirt. This is obviously inside out, but it is all ironed and ready to go. So my next step is to get the overlay cut out, and I have it laid out on the table right now. I don't have a good angle for you yet, so you don't quite get to see it yet. But I was hoping to be able to cut the skirt pieces out like you usually do, 2 at a time, and still use the border print, but the embroidered part. So I wanted the border print as the hem of the skirt of the dress. But the entire thing is not wide enough, or I guess I should say the fabric's not wide enough for the height of the skirt, the length of the skirt that I need to have it completely on there. So I'm gonna have to cut each skirt piece out one by one. And now I kind of have to really figure out how I'm going to do this, because the embroidery does repeat itself, but I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to make that work when I cut these out and not waste too much of the fabric to make sure that I have enough fabric, because I know for a fact I cannot get any more of this fabric. I got it at Joann's and I have not seen it since they started their liquidation sales. So I have what I have and I cannot get more. So we need to do our best to conserve what we have and still make the dress look good. So that's my problem right now. Let me go ahead and move you and see what we can figure out. That might be one of the better angles I've found so far. My table is obviously not all that wide. This is the front piece of the skirt. So if I were to put this here on the border, make sure it's pretty much straight, but it's kind of hard because this is not a straight border. And then if I use this same side, or this opposite side, whoops, that's what I mean. They will not line up, but I really think that's just how I'm going to do it. So I do think I'm going to pin this one here, and then the other one will be directly on that other side there. And I'm going to do the same thing with all 4 skirt pieces. The embroidery will not line up perfectly. In fact, most of it won't line up at all. But that's, I think, what I'm going to have to do to save the most fabric. And I will be more particular on the bodice pieces. Those are smaller pieces. I can be quite a bit more precise with those. And they don't take as much fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the skirt pieces the way I'm planning to. And then I'll be back to show what I do for the bodice. So I have all of my skirt pieces for the overlay cut out. And the next step is to sew these together just like I did on the satin pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and sew those together, and then I will be doing a stitch around the top of the overlay skirt and the satin skirt to stitch the 2 layers together once I get those seams pressed. I may also trim the overlay seams before I press them open, just to cut back on what you'll see through the inside of it. So I'll let you know what I do once I make that choice. Okay, so I have to make a slight apology. I forgot to record placing my bodice pieces on the embroidery last night. I was so excited to get it all cut out that I didn't even think about turning on the camera. So I'm sorry about that, but it is all cut out. So it is folded. You see the front and the back of it right now. But once I get it all unpinned, I still have to cut my notches and things. Once I get it all unpinned, I will lay out the pieces and show you what they will look like, because my first step is to flatline the embroidery mesh overlay to the satin bodice pieces to make those one piece. I will also explain what flatlining is and show you how to do it coming up as well. So here are the bodice pieces I have. Or the front bodice pieces. I am not flatlining the back bodice pieces until I get the front done, just because it takes a lot of pins, and I'm low on my sewing pins, and I don't want to mix up my pieces. So I was looking in my Singer sewing book for a good explanation on what flatlining is, but I can't find it. I could have sworn that I read it in there, and I didn't, because it's not in there. So flatlining, the idea of flatlining is putting two fabrics together, stitching along every single edge, and basically turning the one fabric or the two fabrics into one fabric. The benefit of this is if you have an overlay and you obviously don't want to see the seams in the bodice of the dress from your overlay, then the overlay seams will be in underneath the lining seams, so that's nice. It also gives a little bit of extra body to your base fabric. Not so much in this case because this is mesh with embroidery, but if it was a normal fabric, like 2 pieces of cotton, that gives about double the body there. So the way to do this is I obviously have my pieces pinned all the way around so they will have the least bit of chance to slide. My machine has matching thread and bobbin, matches the fabric so you won't see it. And you also want to have a very, very small seam allowance, almost nothing. I use just the edge of my presser foot, which is about 1/4 of an inch from my needle. So I'll go ahead and show you how to do it. There is one piece of my bodice flatlined. So now I have to continue doing that with all of the bodice pieces. I'm obviously not going to put that on camera. However, I will show you possibly just a picture of what the back bodice pieces look like once they are all pinned for flatlining as well. And I will be back with all of them before I move on to actually construct the bodice. All right, these are the back bodice pieces, all flatlined and ready to go. It is time to go ahead and start putting together the bodice pieces. The first step of putting the bodice together is to flatline this front bodice piece, but not flatline it, stay stitch it. But since I flatlined it, it's stay stitched because stay stitching is just a straight stitch, a 1/4 inch from the edge of the fabric. So every piece is stay stitched, even though it doesn't need to be. Step number 2 is to piece the front bodice pieces with the side bodice pieces. These pieces. So this curved edge, the princess seam edge, matches up with this edge. So this edge will have to be clipped within the stay stitching in order to match these seams along that. And then I will do a straight stitch on both of the princess seams. After the princess seams, it is the back pieces, which this is the back, and then this is the side back. And so these two seams will match up. And so I'll do those. And then this is what these two look like together. I do wish I had some darker flowers on one of these pieces and some lighter flowers. I guess I have a little bit of a mixture on both of these. But I also did the same thing with the front pieces. I've got the lighter flowers on the same side and the darker flowers. But that's kind of just how it ended up working out, so I could make sure that I had enough of the fabric. So that is the way it is. I'll go ahead and stitch those 4 seams, and then once those seams are done, I will stitch the bodice together at the shoulder seams, and then after that it is the sleeves. So I will be back to show you how to do the sleeves. All right, we are still working on the dress. Last night I got the entire bodice stitched together at the shoulder seams, and it's all pressed. That is taking some time because I have to press it on a little bit of a lower setting to get the seams somewhat flat, and then turn up the setting and put a pressing cloth over it, which I'm just using some muslin as my pressing cloth on this. And I'm turning the steam on so then I can get good seams. The mesh is having a hard time laying flat with the embroidery as well, which is why I'm doing that. But in order to not possibly ruin the fabric and melt it, I'm using a pressing cloth and, you know, doing the multiple steps. So the next step is the sleeves. I have to do this in multiple parts, and I'm not positive exactly how. First thing I do need to do is take the lining and hem the bottom. Let me double check my instructions actually. So the first thing I do have to do is hem the bottom of the lining pieces of the sleeve because it won't be matched, like they won't meet up as a seam, so it won't make it thick. That goes to the I'll show you when I do it. It meets like right about here on the front and back of the dress, so they do not come together, so it won't thicken that up. After I do the hems of the lining pieces, then I have to gather the cap of the sleeves, and I will actually be gathering the lining sleeve and the mesh together to make it one piece. I may end up flatlining them real quick and then doing the gathering stitches just to make sure that they are one piece, but I decided to, so the lining will end right about where this border starts. I decided to use the border print on the sleeves. So the mesh part of the sleeve will be longer, obviously, than the lining. I'm hoping it's gonna fit right because I added the like 1/2 inch to the sleeve cap. So hopefully it'll all go together and fit right and won't be tight, but I think we'll be okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the hem of the lining, and then I will be back to show you how to do the rest of the sleeve. Okay, so both of my sleeves, this one's a little bit plain with the embroidery, but that's okay. Both of my sleeves have that narrow hem at the bottom, and now they need to be gathered from end to end. I will not be gathering these pieces because they will just get bunched right up in there. And then I have, and you can't see them any longer because when I hemmed it, it covered them up. But on the ends of all of these pieces is a small dot and a large dot. Yeah, you legitimately can't see them at all. And then this blue mark at the top is where, you can't hardly see that either, is where the seam goes, the shoulder seam. And then I also have the dots on the bodice. Here we are. It's really light on the front and the back. That was the back. And then the front should be right there past the, just past the seam is the other small dot. So I have to match up those, match up the dot to the shoulder seam, and match up the notches once I get the gathering stitches into the sleeves. As I will show you how I attach the sleeves once I get the gathering stitches done. So I moved over to my table to hopefully give you guys a better view of what I need to do. This is the back of the bodice. This is the front of the bodice. I know you can't tell based on the way I have you positioned. That's okay. And then I do have my double notches. Here we are. double notches here, single notch here. So double notches in back, single notches in the front. First thing I'm going to do is match up that blue dot with the shoulder seam. And then because this is gathered, I will be gathering it from either side of the sleeve up to the shoulder seam because it seems to be the easiest way to do it. So I'm going to match up my ends to their dots as well. And then I'm going to pull up my gathering stitches one side at a time, and I will meet the notches as I gather and spread the gathering out evenly on each side of the sleeve. When I originally did it, it really didn't have to be gathered that much, so I don't think there's going to be much gathering this time either. It's a little bit harder because it doesn't, like, embroidery of the mesh doesn't really like to gather because it's thick. So getting it through that is a little bit of a struggle right now. And I'm trying to not break those gathering stitches. Okay, so that's pretty much gathered. Now I'm going to go ahead and pin this half. First thing I am going to pin is my notches, which are actually matched up already just by gathering in them. And I do like to over pin when I gather just so my machine is all good. It doesn't move the fabric too much and keeps it nice. I have a hard time with gathering stitches. All right, and now we do the same thing to the back. So since you've seen this, I'm gonna go ahead and do that off camera. And then I will stitch this and I will be back to show you the finished product. So I was gonna come back and show you once I got them both done. But I did wanna check it out anyways, because I always check my progress. It came together quite nicely. I do like it. However, I am looking at how that extra length is, and I may be actually stitching, it's not gathered, but I may be stitching this extra length onto the bodice, because right now it's just free, and I'm not sure how that's really going to look. Once it's all stitched together. So I am going to put on the other sleeve the same way. And probably do this side seam, because I think that's the next step, is to stitch it together at the side seam. And then I'm going to try it on just the bodice with no zipper, obviously, just to see how these sleeves will lay, and we will make the decision on what we do with this extra border part then. Okay, so I do have both of the sleeves on now. It looks really cute, I think. I do still have to figure out what I am doing with the sleeves, but the next step is not the side seams, because I didn't make the lining, obviously, if you watched last week, of the bodice in my mock-up. So the next step is actually putting the lining together the exact same way we put the bodice together. It'll be easier because I don't have to flatline it. It's just the pink layer. So we'll do the princess seams, we'll do the back, we'll do the shoulders. But then they are actually attached at the side seams. So I do not sew the side seams yet, not until the lining is on it. I will still figure out what to do. I need to do a little bit of thinking before I tell you exactly what I'm going to do with those sleeves. I may just go ahead and pin the sides together and check it out that way before I do the lining. Not completely positive. So I'll be back when I know, and I will have the lining all put together. Okay, so I do have the entire lining. Oops. Where's my shoulder seam? The entire lining stitched together, just like I have the bodice. So the next step is to attach the bodice to the lining. I'll go ahead and show you how to do that. So this does say with right sides together. So we will get the right side of the bodice, and the shiny side is the right side of the lining. And we need to pin these together, matching all of our seam lines, pin around the neck and pin around the arm hole, not catching the sleeves in. So I think I'm gonna have to wedge the sleeves up this way into the bodice and the lining. So I'm gonna do the neck first, stitch that, and then I will come back and repin the armholes and stitch those. And then to turn them right sides out, I'll be pulling the lining through the shoulders, but I'll probably do that on camera to show you how to do it. Okay, so I have it all stitched together. It looks really goofy right now, but I'm gonna show you anyways. Oops. That's the lining side. It's all poofy there because the sleeves are shoved in there. It does say that I need to understitch the neck line as much as possible. I can't figure out how to do that, so unfortunately I am going to skip that step. But I'm going to give it a really nice, good, solid press, and hopefully the neckline will remain crisp once that's done, because I can't figure out how to understitch anything more than like 2 inches on each side of that V-neck. So now I need to pull the back of this through the front to get it all turned right sides out. So I'll go ahead and show you how I do that. So the directions state to turn the lining to the inside by pulling the sections through the shoulders. So I'm going to pull the back of it through the front, through the shoulder area. And this is literally all I'm doing. And we have to be careful not to pull too hard because this fabric is a little bit delicate, obviously, because it is thin. So we'll do it slowly. Once we got that sleeve through, it seemed to come through pretty easy, actually. So now let's do the other side. So same thing I do with the button-down shirts when you have to basically make the burrito, the yoke burrito, what I like to call it. But this seems to be easier because the satin and the embroidery. So that's nice. Oh no. Oh no. Did I really mess that up? Oh. My sleeve is not pinned correctly on this one. Oh no. Okay, so I have to undo. That is so not good. Okay, my sleeve is not on the right side. And I have to figure out what I did. I think I just pinned the wrong side of the sleeve to the lining. Oh my gosh, and that whole seam is inside there. So I don't have to undo the entire seam, but I do have to fix where the sleeve is at. Wowee, I've never made a mistake quite like that before. I just completely pinned that wrong. So we'll pull this back through here and see. I'll go ahead and undo this and see what I did wrong and be back. Okay, I do have it turned the correct way now. I'm actually not positive that I did it wrong. I may have just turned it out and looked at it wrong, but that's okay. I redid it and it's all in there. So here it is. No, it has not been pressed. I literally just got it flipped the right way out. So I have to completely press all of these seams because it looks like it's just a mess right now. So that's my next step. And then I will show you how to attach the lining to the rest of the bodice once I get this pressed. Okay, so the next step can be a little bit confusing when you're looking at the bodice until you get it opened up and like you know really what you're looking at. I had to do it before I opened it up. So it says to open up the lining away from the bodice and then pin your side seams, your bodice front side seam to your back side seam, and same with the lining, and stitch it in a continuous line. So this is one side, this is the bodice, this is the lining. Here you can tell because this side has the embroidery. So I will be pinning these together, this side and the other side, but I'm doing them separately because I don't want to lose my pins, and I'm a little bit confused just by looking at it when it's opened up. I have to do it bit by bit, but pin front to back, the bodice pieces and the lining pieces, stitch in the continuous seam on both sides. For the next step, I will be back to show you the next step. Okay, so we have our bodice all stitched together. It does say to top stitch the shoulder seam, but I do not want to top stitch because that's just a design feature, and I am not top stitching on this nice fabric, so I'm skipping that step. After top stitching the shoulder, I need to, it says to stay stitch the bodice and the lining. The bodice is already, the bottom of it, the bodice is already stay stitched because I flatlined it, but I will go ahead and stay stitch the bottom of the lining, and then I have to press the lining up 5/8 of an inch and trim that seam to prepare it for attaching to the skirt. So when I attach it to the skirt, which will be the next step, I will show you how I do that. I have the bodice, the lining of the bodice all pressed up. Now the bottom there, you can see, is a nice crisp pressed line. So the next step is to attach the bodice to the skirt at matching the side seams, the back, and all the other seams. Clip the bodice where needed. I did not actually have to clip the bodice on the fitting, the toile, so I doubt I'm gonna have to clip the bodice this time, but we will see as I go. I'll let you know once I do that. So I will pin the bodice to the skirt and then do that stitch and be back. I went ahead and I did the hem of the dress. The pattern calls for a 5/8 rolled hem, so it'd be just over 1/4 inch for each. But I wanted this a little bit shorter underneath that trim, so I did 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. So it's actually 1 inch that I took it up. Next step is to insert the zipper. And this is not supposed to be done as an invisible zipper. That's supposed to be done as just a regular insert the zipper. Which actually I like because it's a lot easier to do. I don't like doing invisible zippers, especially on a fabric like this. So I am supposed to, it always says to baste the edges together, but I don't like to baste it because then I have to rip out those stitches, and I don't like to have to do that because it risks ruining the fabric. So I press the back seam open, which is what I still have to do, and then I pin the zipper on where it needs to go and just stitch the zipper on the outside of the fabric. I'll probably still stitch this one on the outside of the fabric, and then we have to also iron the lining so that it will lay flat, but I do that once the zipper is in, so I can iron the lining along the zipper and pin it at the same time. And then the lining has to be hand stitched down along the zipper and the folded edge to hide the seam, the waistband seam, into the lining. So that's what I will be doing next. So I have the entire zipper all pinned. I'm gonna keep it up here so that it doesn't get caught on anything. I also have my zipper foot in my machine. You can't really tell from there. So all I have to do is stitch down one side to the bottom, stitch down the other side and across the bottom. I also am going to make sure below the waistband I have the overlay not attached into that seam so that it will actually just completely blend in when I'm wearing the dress, in theory. Hopefully that is how it works out. So I'm gonna go ahead and stitch the zipper in, and then I will show you what the dress looks like once I get the zipper in, because then the rest will be all hand stitching. So that's my Easter dress. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and maybe you learned a little bit from it. This is a really easy pattern to make. As you can see, I did decide to leave the ends of the sleeve loose. It's not a perfect finishing when it comes to the sleeves, but I really don't want to restrict my movement, and so for me, this was the right choice. May not be if you have the same sort of fabric. You may want to actually attach that, and if you do, I would recommend making the base instead of just the cap, enlarging the entire sleeve, because I did have to change that. Instead of just the cap of the sleeve, I would also give some extra space there. This was a really easy dress to make. It's actually wasn't all that hard to fit either if you go back and watch last week's video. I really like the finished product because it fits exactly the way that it's supposed to based on the pattern. So I will probably continue to make petite adjustments for the majority of my clothing in the future, because I really do like the way that these fit. So if you liked this video, hit that like button for me. If you want to see all of my videos and not miss any, hit that subscribe button and I will show up in your subscribers page on YouTube every time I post something. What else? I think that's it. Oh, hit that notification bell if you want to be notified when I post videos, because they are not completely consistent these last 2 weeks now. I've been posted on Wednesdays for whatever reason. So thank you for continuing to watch my videos, and Thank you to all of my subscribers. I really appreciate you. This is So Be It.